Welcome to SGNP. Sit back for the next few minutes and hear stories heard nowhere else on radio, in a magazine, or on the internet. We're the audible voice of gospel music. Our sole purpose at SGNP is to inspire, edify, encourage, and entertain. Now, here's our host, Darren Sutherland, and his partner, Southern Gospel Music Association President and lead singer for Dolly Parton's own quartet, the Kingdom Heirs, Arthur Rice. What's wrong with living right anyway?
With other heroes of the faith, so many soldiers of the cross, singing out the grand old story, Jesus saves the lost. Oh, and even though you've laid your armor down and passed the torch, you all are heroes of the faith, soldiers of the cross. You're there with
and welcome once again to SGNP. Darren Sutherland here on Southern Gospel News Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of our show on our podcast. No matter if you listen to us on podcast or on radio or on the internet, you can always find us on the internet at The Light. That's right, The Light Atlanta. We're on their internet station 24/7. And my good friends over there, Don Atkinson and the folks doing that great internet radio station, and they play some great gospel music, and they play SGNP 2 or 3 times a week. So we appreciate Don and their folks for doing that. If you listen to us on podcast, and that's where most people listen to us, always make sure you leave a comment on your Apple podcast and tell us what you like about the show, or even if you don't like something about the show. Had somebody tell me the other week, Darren, hush, let them talk more. So guess what I've been doing? I've been hushing a little bit more so you can let them talk. Today, got a great guest coming on. Legacy 5's tenor, Josh Feemster. Feemster. I messed the last name up constantly. I want to call him Flimster or Feemster. Feemster. He'll correct me. Don't worry about it when we talk to Josh. Great singer, great conversation. You're going to want to hear it and want to be a part of it, talking about the progressive nature of gospel music and all that kind of fun stuff. But on the line with me today, Arthur is on the Singing at Sea, along with every other gospel artist in America. So on the line with me today is my good friend up there on Facebook land. He runs a page called Southern Gospel Memories and Pictures. He's our resident historian here for SGNP. He's sitting in today, not doing his little segment. We've missed him the past couple of weeks, but that's been my fault, not his fault. Jeff Turner. Jeff, what's going on up here in St. Louis, Missouri, other than snow and cold?
Snow and cold, Darren. That's the way it is in the Midwest, so we're dealing with it. But it's all right. It's all good.
Well, as I said earlier in the show, we've got Josh Feemster with Legacy 5 coming on today, a great tenor. Was even a great lead singer at one point in his career, and he's one of these tenor leads. And we mentioned earlier today on Southern Gospel Memories and Pictures, you let the cat out of the bag and told folks we were talking about tenor singers, okay? So in your opinion, and you're the historian, let's just go back. I'm going to name it era by era, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Fair enough? Now, we hadn't went over this, okay? 1950s and before. Who's the greatest one that came out of there?
Oh, I would say probably Denver Crumpler. First with the Rangers Quartet, and then the Statesmen.
My God is real, for I can feel Him in my soul. Yes, my God is real.
He tragically passed away in 1957. I believe at the age of 40, 42, somewhere around in there.
Man.
So he was great Irish tenor.
Let's go to the heyday, the all-night singing convention type era and the radio days of the 60s. Who's your best tenor?
Oh, man. Well, you had Bill Shaw and Rosie Roselle of the Statesmen and Blackwoods. They were very popular. I like Bill Hefner of the Harvesters. And then there's just so many. I mean, I got this written down on paper, and I got so many names I'm looking at here. And, you hate to leave anybody out, but Jim Murray.
you in the
Well, he ended up being with the Imperials in the mid-'60s, replacing Cheryl Nielsen, who
Right.
there's another great one. So you could just go on and on.
Well, let me ask you this. We're talking about the 60s, and there's so many great ones. Who's the most underrated of that period, do you feel like, that doesn't get – that when you listen to, you're like, wow, and they don't get the publicity they deserve?
You know, there was a guy named Curtis Elkins who sung with Bob Wills and the Inspirationals. He was a great tenor.
At the cross, where I first saw the light, and the burden of my heart rolled away.
That would probably be the one that stood out to me as far as not getting the recognition he deserved.
Let's move forward. The Jubilee era, 1970s. And I say the Jubilee era, that's because most people got their gospel music off the Gospel Singing Jubilee every Sunday morning and other places. Who's the guy that's the era that I can really talk intelligently about. And the guy that first comes to my mind in that era is Archie Watkins of the Inspirations.
What a glad thought, some wonderful morning, just to hear Gabriel's trumpet sound. When I wake up to sleep no more, rising to meet our blessed Redeemer, with a glad shout I'll leave the ground. When I wake up to sleep no more.
Coy Cook of the Florida Boys, he was on that show, Gospel Singing Jubilee. Mm-hmm. Also, I think Pat Hoffmaster came along replacing Bill Shaw in the early 70s. And just an outstanding voice. He could sing with power and with finesse. Very unusual voice, and I remember hearing him at the Blackwood Brothers Homecoming in the early 80s, and just a great tenor.
Let's move on to the 80s, a great era for tenor singers. I mean, we could talk about Brian Free. We could talk about Kirk Talley. We could talk about, not Jay Perrick. Jay's more the 90s, but his dad with the Kingsmen, Gary Shepard. Who you got? Who you got?
Danny Funderburk.
No doubt.
Who was with the Singing Americans at the time, and then the Cathedrals gave him a call when Kirk Talley left and went with the Talleys. He would be one. Ernie Phillips, who replaced Johnny Perrick with the Kingsmen.
Yeah.
Larry Ford, there's another one.
Yeah.
He's more known for the Gaither, being on the Gaither videos, but before then he was with the Dixie Echoes and then the James Blackwood Quartet.
Right, and he had that strong, like Irish tenor voice too. It was just a big, that type. And you know what, Ernie Haas, you can't downplay Ernie in that era. As we move to the 90s, maybe that was more Ernie Haas era than the 80s. So who you got in the 90s? Who you looking at around the 90s? And I know the earlier we get, some of these guys are still around that were there in the 90s, but certainly Brian Free carried it over and has done great with Brian Free in Assurance. But in the 90s, who you got? Tenor singers.
How about Brian Carter,
who
started out with the Calvermen of Michigan and then moved on to the Palmetto State Quartet. Just a great voice. He could also imitate a lot of other tenor singers. He made a recording of several different of his favorite tenor singers and imitated them on the recording. So that was pretty neat.
I'm gonna throw one.
David,
I'm gonna throw one out there to you, and before you announce the next one that I knew you was about to when I heard the D on the name. But there was a guy that sang with Phil Cross and Poets Voices named Tony Jarman. And Tony left and went to Legacy 5 when they first started and sang tenor with them. Do you realize he was one of the finalists with the Gaither Vocal Band? It was down between him and David Phelps to see who would be the new tenor singer for the Gaither Vocal Band. And David won, of course. And as I look at the year 2000, that's when I started thinking that David really started making his way in there. And David, without a doubt, may be one of those once-in-a-lifetime voices. Once, you know what I'm talking about? Well, if we have a
Yep.
1,000-year rain, or if in St. Louis you have a 1,000-year flood with the Mississippi, David Phelps may be a 1,000-year voice. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Is there a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, he was one of a kind for sure.
He's alive. He's alive. He's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive. He's alive. Oh, he's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. Oh, he's alive. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive, and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive.
Overall, we've named a lot of great tenors, okay? You've named a lot of great tenors. Let's put together the three tenors like they do in opera. What three gospel music three are you putting there together today, Jeff Turner? Go ahead.
well,
You
I
can
think-
only
I
have
think-
you can only have three. You can only have three.
Okay, I think I'm going to go the Irish route then. And we're going to go with Cheryl Nielsen of the Songfellows and the Imperials and several different groups, the Masters 5. And then we're going to go with Denver Crumpler, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go with Asbury Atkins of West Virginia, who was an original member of the Dixie Melody Boys in the mid-'50s. Also sung with the Gospel Harmony Boys and the Swanee River Boys. A lot of boys. But, yeah, all three great Irish tenors. I think that would be a good trio right there.
Jeff, as always, thank you for your knowledge. Thanking you for being a part of SGNP. And I knew you were going to pull out some names that a lot of folks have never heard of. But here's the great thing. Go to his Facebook site, Southern Gospel Memories and Pictures. Look at those pictures. Look the names up on just Google the names he mentioned. Read a little bit about them and learn more about Southern gospel music and its history. And if Arthur was here with us today, he would say to you, check all those folks out at the Southern Gospel Music Association Hall of Fame there in Sevierville, Tennessee, and Pigeon Forge at Dollywood. Jeff, as always, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it, buddy.
Great to reminisce a little, Darren. Talk to you next week.
All right, my friend. Bye-bye.
Now, here's our announcer.
And that's the statesman's leader.
What's that name?
Hobie Lister. And that crisper, flakier cracker, boys. What's that name?
Premium Saltine.
Ah, you said it, so let's sing it now.
They're better baked and better wrapped. Premium Saltine. Nabisco's crackers in the inner sealed pack. Premium Saltine. Delicious soup or salad or for a snack. Premium Saltine. Nabisco's crackers in the inner sealed pack. Premium Saltine.
Once again, I want to stop for just a moment and thank my friend Mike Lindell and the fine folks over at MyPillow and MyPillow.com. You know, when we started this show last April, MyPillow was one of the first sponsors to jump on board. And since, I guess, May, I've been sleeping on a MyPillow. And tell you the truth, I sleep rather well. My wife looks at me sometimes and she tries to steal my pillow from my pillow. And I try to steal her pillow from my pillow, and we just make a mess of things. I'm sure that happens in your house too. Well, whether you're married, you're single, you're going to love My Pillow no matter where you sleep or who you sleep with. You're just going to love My Pillow. So right now they got a 4-pack special that they're offering with free shipping and a money-back guarantee through March of 2019. That's right, a money-back guarantee through March of 2019. Give them a call today, 1-800-544-8939, 1-800-544-8939. How much is your sleep at night worth to you? They'll advise you on what kind to buy based on what your weight, your bed size. Do you use a feather pillow? Whatever kind of pillow you use, their sleep experts can help you. 1-800-544-8939. They know how to make it work and make it work well. And always when you call, use that special offer code SGNP. Make sure you use that offer code so we can get credit for it, and they'll know where you came from. You know, recently I started working out a lot, and I went to a specialty running store to help me find some good shoes because the shoes I had were hurting my feet. Quite frankly, folks, if you're having trouble sleeping, MyPillow's the folks you need to call. Once again, 1-800-544-8939. Free shipping and a money-back guarantee through March of 2019. Always use the code SGNP or go online to MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com, but just use that code SGNP. And hey, thanks for being a part of SGNP MyPillow. Welcome back to SGNP. Darren Sutherland here today. As you know, Arthur is out on a cruise having a good time with every other gospel artist in America except this young man that we're about to talk to. He's working today. He's at the World Congress Center in Atlanta, Georgia, working. Folks don't think gospel music artists work during the week. But Josh Feemster, the tenor singer for Legacy 5, is on the line with us today. Josh, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. It definitely work. When you have another business, you still have to work.
Hey, you know what? The Collinsworth fan, Phil told me not too long ago, he said, a lot of folks think us being on the road pays the bills. What pays the bills is what we do when we're at home. So, Josh, you reside over in East Alabama, but you're over here in Atlanta today, huh? At a photography convention or something, I think you told me before we started. So
yeah, we have my wife and I have a photography studio in downtown Gadsden, actually, that we've had for going on 11 years now, and it's always been a great business for us. So the Legacy 5 schedule most of the time still allows me to be able to do that. There's times it gets very hectic, but that's part of life. But today we're over here doing some of the new things that's going on in that world. So that's why I'm in Atlanta.
There you go. Hey, I got to ask you, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm talking to somebody from Alabama, and I do a ton of work in Alabama myself. So being a Georgia Bulldog guy, am I talking to a War Eagle or Roll Tide? You got to let me know so we'll know what kind of.
I don't know anything Roll Tide. I don't even know what it was you said there. So. I think that's a Georgia school, I do believe. Anyway, that other one you mentioned.
You know, it does seem like now a lot of people from Georgia do go to Alabama and Auburn both as we go and as we grow. Josh, tell the world about Josh Feemster. And I know you're the tenor singer with Legacy 5. We'll talk about a little bit about that. But tell the world about Josh and about your career.
Well, I like a lot of the folks in gospel music. I grew up in a singing family my whole life. My mom and dad sang regionally, and so I kind of grew up in that world. And when I was around, I think I was 4, I got my first drum set. Started playing the drums, and when I was when I was 10, I started playing for them. I was always somewhat involved in that world, in that Southern gospel world or gospel music world. Then around 15 or 16, got interested in singing. Bill Lawrence, that sang with Brian Friend Assurance and Gold City. Mm-hmm. He was the first guy that filled in for Tim whenever Tim was kind of easing out.
Right.
Bill was singing with my mom and dad at that time, and he heard me kind of singing around at practice and when they were rehearsing, and he said, "Man, you got to start singing." So he kind of pushed me to do that. I got very interested, and really, I've always been the personality type. When I get interested in something, I really jump in. So I really started focusing in on it, and I played basketball in school. I was pretty good at that, and started to dial that back a little bit, and really singing. And then for the next couple of years, from about 16 to 18, I sang with them, sang regionally, just in the North Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, that area. And then a group that was pretty popular here in the South, the Singing Ambassadors, Tim Mays was leaving them to sing lead there. And somehow, I'll tell you how, my dad knew Sid Presley that sang baritone with them.
Yeah. And
word had just gotten around as a pretty good singer, young guy, so he called my dad. My dad said, "I think you need to go do that." So I went with those guys for about a year and enjoyed it, had a good time, learned a lot, and decided to come back home and just kind of sing with some friends of mine regionally.
Yeah.
And then we did that for about 6 or 7 years. I did that. And a guy that I always idolized from a music production standpoint called me after he and Ernie had kind of dissolved their relationship with Signature Sound, and Gary Jones started Mercy's Mark.
Right.
So, and did that for 4 years or so. Then kind of honestly felt like the Lord was leading me to come off the road with that. And so I did, came back home. My mom and dad had got very involved in our home church, and my dad was handling all the music there. And 6 months after, I had a massive hemorrhaging stroke and passed away. So it was kind of a shock, just a huge shock to me and our family.
Right.
And the church asked me to go over the music, and that was something I never wanted to do. Wasn't even remotely interested in that. And long story short, 8 years later, I was still doing that when word got out to. It was kind of an interesting situation on how I ended up with Legacy 5, but Scott Fowler called. And we started talking, and that's where it leads to Legacy 5.
No doubt. Josh, when I think, we talked before on the air before about some mutual folks that we knew, but when you talk about East Alabama in particular, the gospel music heritage is so strong over there. I mean, you got folks like Jack Toney out of that area, folks like the Goodmans out of that area, and other great folks out of that area. Why do you think it is so strong for gospel music singers in that particular area?
Well, honestly, I don't know. I just think there's just such a rich heritage there, and I'm not sure. I think it gets back to the church world.
Yeah.
Back 50 to 60 years ago. Convention singing was a big thing on Sand Mountain, North Alabama. I mean, you had so many people from that area, Buster Goodman, Jack Toney. I mean, there was just so many. Jake Hess was, from Alabama area.
Right.
And I think there was just so much emphasis put on singing schools and convention singing that it just kind of morphed into that. Because that's how my folks came up, going to some of the singing schools and class singing and all that. So I think that is probably it more than anything else.
Got to ask you this question. Have you ever been one of them gospel groups singing at Trade Day? And for our listeners that don't know what Trade Day is, we got to tell them about it in just a second. Do you know what I'm talking about over in Center?
What is it?
Trade Day. They have that huge outdoor flea market just south of Fort Payne when you're going north of Garrison, Jacksonville. You know what I'm talking
about? Collinsville Trade Day.
Yeah, Collinsville Trade Day. Have you ever been one of them gospel groups out there singing at Trade Day?
No, I've never done that. Never have done that. But I've been to Trade Day a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. You know what? What do you think? Everybody's got a what they term an achievement in life that they think that helped them get to where they're at. For our listeners out there because we have a lot of folks that listen that want to get to the point where you're at singing full time. What do you think one of the achievement that helped propel you or prepared you to get to where you're at today more than anything else? What would that be?
For me, it is. I think it's entirely the work that I put into it.
Yeah.
Early on, and then I honestly never. I could sing. For me personally, I could sing in a higher range. But I kind of when I really got interested in singing, Gold City, when Ivan Parker was there, and actually Steve Lacy was singing baritone with them. Steve was there for about 3 or 4 years.
Right.
That's when I got extremely interested in professional gospel music. Steve was from right down the road from where I live, so there was just a connection there. So I really started listening to the way that both Steve and Ivan both sang. And I could sing up in that higher range, but I didn't have the fullness of the tone. Some of that was maturity, and then some of it was just not really understanding what to do. And for me, around 18 to 19 years old, I really started it was a big part of me that wanted to figure out how to do that. And it started the journey that I just stayed on until I finally found a vocal instructor and a program that would broaden my range on the higher end. And the work that I put in from the time I was around 27, 28 years old till now, that has gotten me where I'm at as far as singing. I never aspired to sing tenor with a quartet. That was never even a thought.
You never wanted to be Brian Free, in other words.
No, never wanted to do that in any way. I was always thought of myself as a lead singer, just a high lead singer. I started working with a guy named Brett Manning out of Nashville. He had a program called Sing Success, and it's the world's most popular training system that's ever been created. Brett and I became really good friends, and we just, through the years, he saw that I could sing higher, and I had a thicker. Basically, it boils down to physiology. Had a bigger vocal cords than most tenors, and that's where the broad tone came from.
Nice.
So it's just, to me, that's it more than anything else. Just the work that you put into it, and if you have a passion for it, and honestly, you feel like you kind of got a calling for it, that God's leading you into that, you really need to work extremely hard to perfect that craft. And for me, that's kind of what I've been doing, and it's still going on to this day. I work on it usually daily.
Nice. Let's take a break. We'll be right back here in just a second on SGNP with our buddy Josh Feemster.
Hey, I'm Karen Peck Gooch with Karen Peck and the River, and you're listening to the best in gospel music right here on SGNP.
For the past 8 years, I have drove a Kia Sorento. That's right, folks, a Kia Sorento built right here in the good old USA, West Point, Georgia. But honestly, you've got a choice when you buy a Kia. And there's dealers all around. I trust my friends at Carriage Kia in Woodstock, Georgia, Gainesville, Georgia, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama at their affiliate Julio Jones Kia. You can't get a better deal than what you can from Carriage Kia. So do me a favor. If you love gospel music and you love SGNP, go online, check them out. www.carriagekia.com. That's www.carriagekia.com, or give them a call, 678-619-5132. Anywhere in America, they'll beat that Kia price that you've been offered. Give them a call, 678-619-5132, and hey, tell them Darren sent you.
Jesus, holy is thy first heard it spoken, so sacred it was.
with tenor Josh Feemster. Why do I keep wanting to mess your name up, Josh? I am
Yeah,
sorry.
let me correct you on that.
Go ahead.
It's Feemster.
Feemster.
Yeah, I know you're a North Georgia guy, so I get it.
Yeah, you know what? It is what it is. I guess if you live east of the Coosa River, you call it Flemster. If you live on the west side, you call it Feemster.
That could be. That could be it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. The funny thing, and I'm going to mention this last thing about gospel music, then I want to hear more a little bit about Josh and his family and that sort of thing. The funny thing is you sing tenor, but you were always a lead. You never wanted to sing tenor, huh? Never looked up towards tenors, never thought about singing tenor, and it just happened this way. That's kind of unusual, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's extremely unusual. It's not that I didn't look up to tenor singers. That wasn't it. Matter of fact, some of my favorite singers were actually tenors. When David Phelps came on the scene, I was just blown away with his tone and his fullness.
Yeah.
But I always preferred a higher lead range voice. Honestly, I never felt like it was something that I could do. Really and truly, it took those 8 years that I wasn't on the road singing, where I just kind of completely regrouped as a singer in my head, what I was thinking, into what I wanted to be and what I could be. And for me, Scott Fowler and Gerald Wolfe honestly kind of nudged me into this position. That whole thing happened. I was wanting to get back on the road and sing a little bit, just doing solo dates and, just get back out there and sing.
Right.
But I just wanted to do solo dates. So I ended up getting in touch with Gerald Wolfe, and we did a CD called Hymns and Classics, all it was. And it's my voice and Gerald playing the piano. That's all that's on there. So we did 10 songs or 11 songs. Everybody would know the songs, and Gerald played and I sang with just cool arrangements doing them. So that's what we did. During that process, because I had not seen Gerald in years, one of the very first things he said was, "Why didn't you tell me you were a tenor now?" And I said, "Man, I'm not a quartet tenor." So we're literally in the studio recording the laying down the piano tracks for that project. And I look up and Scott Fowler walks in. So I hadn't seen the same thing, hadn't seen Fowler in years. And he said, "Man, same thing. Why didn't you tell me you were a tenor now?" Well, I was so anti being a tenor that, I literally just kind of blew him off. It was just, thank you for your, for the confident or compliments or whatever, but I'm not a tenor.
Yeah. 5
weeks later, after I told Fowler that, I ended up taking the job with Legacy 5. And, for the past going on 4 years now, that's what we've been doing.
Josh, I'm going to hand you a magic wand, okay? You and your wife are in business for yourself in the photography business, okay? But yet you sing on the weekends, and that's a full-time job in itself. So basically, you got 2 full-time jobs. I'm gonna hand you a magic wand though, and I want you to give me 2 or 3 things that you think could improve gospel music overall this day and time. What would they be?
Well, I think the number one thing is kind of twofold. I think you've got to hang on to the heritage somewhat, and then I think you got to embrace the new somewhat.
Yeah.
That's a couple of things. You can't get away from what your roots are, but at the same time, you've got to evolve with what's going on, not so much in the world, but what's in the church world. And now for a major part of the church world, praise and worship music has really kind of taken over what's happening mainstream church world. So I think there's some aspects, and I think there are a lot of groups and artists that they are approaching it that way a little bit, just by changing the music enough to reach people, to actually still have an audience. And I think that's something that's got to happen. I don't know exactly what you do to do that, but I think there's some of that has to happen. The other thing I think is what we were talking about earlier, vocal training, really understanding that what we do is very serious, and especially if you're representing the Christian music world and having a calling on your life, you need to work as hard as possible to make it the very best it can be. So I think that's something that needs to happen too. So probably those 2 things. Just really look at where the Christian world is headed, and then figure out a way to take what we do and introduce that to that world, and then really strive for excellence, I think, would be the other part.
Josh, I'm a firm believer that millennials in particular do not put labels on music. If they hear Jason Crabb and they like Jason Crabb, they say, "I like Jason Crabb." If they hear Alabama, they say, "I like Alabama," they like Alabama. They don't define it like our generation did. You're roughly same age as I am, or in that demographic, where it was a broad difference between Southern gospel in contemporary. You either in the contemporary camp or you're in the Southern Gospel camp. Yet today we see songs that are sung by contemporary groups also sung by Southern Gospel groups. Case in point, Chainbreakers by the Gaither Vocal Band. Great, great, great song. Should Southern Gospel, you said earlier you think we ought to embrace our heritage. You come from one of the most heritage areas in all of gospel music, like we talked about, with great singers like Jake Hess, Jack Toney, the Goodmans in East Alabama. But yet we've grown more progressive, and a lot of folks don't like that. Do you feel like we're probably in a time period maybe like the early 70s when the Hensons came along adding drums? And let's face it, that was a no-no in a lot of churches back in the day.
Right.
Is the musical styles and basically the generations changing to where we're going to see a more progressive Southern Gospel for it to grow and improve? Or is it going to hold the same? What's your feeling? You see it on the road. I'm asking you from an artist's opinion and just from what you guys see on the road.
I think we've got to embrace some of the things. You know, with what you said, just with what Triumphant has done with Chainbreaker, Gaither Vocal Band did it with Chainbreaker. There's other songs out there. I think here's what I think more than anything else, and this is going to shock some people in the contemporary music world.
Yeah,
I think the contemporary music world has almost adapted some of the things that gospel music people have been doing for years.
Bingo! Look at David Crider sing "I'll Fly Away" with a banjo. Right. You know.
Yeah. There's a lot of that that's going on, and now when you listen to, because I grew up a Southern Gospel boy, man. For years I couldn't stand praise and worship music, and I've kind of embraced it a little bit over the past couple of years, mainly because of the wording and where it has went. It went from a generic, simple message to a much more profound message in that music. And then musically, it's went to a different level. So I think it's got to hang on to what we've had for years, just like I said, and then do music that also brings the greater Christian music world into what we do, to open them up to that four-part harmony and piano. You know, nothing but four-part harmony and piano.
Right. Because
that's something that's complete. That's just gospel music. That's the heritage of gospel music. And there's ways that's done. I've seen that happen in churches that would never have a gospel music act in there. But then you'll see a quartet get up out of the church, out of the music people that are involved, and the crowd go nuts over it. They love it.
Let me throw this one at you, because I'm going to talk East Alabama with you for just a second. I guess I'm 49 years old, so it's probably 25, 30 years ago. I was at June Jam up in Fort Payne, okay?
Yeah.
Gospel music kid growing up. You grow up in East Alabama. If you like music, you've got to like Alabama at that point in time in your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Randy Owens and the guy. I mean, they're legendary, okay?
Right.
Vestal Goodman gets up and sings before Alabama comes out, and they bring her to the stage to sing God Bless America, and the place goes crazy, okay?
Right.
Do you feel in this day and time with younger folks that the country music fan is more of a gospel fan than contemporary fan, or do you feel like the country's really got no place in the gospel world? Because there's a broad argument out there amongst a lot of artists. Don't let the country guys sing, but yet when we see Reba on TV with the Isaacs standing behind them, how many hits on social media did the Isaacs get that night, and how much products did they sell worldwide that they never would have sold? Does that help or does that hurt? I think it helps. What's your thought?
Oh, no, it absolutely helps.
Yeah.
That it makes no sense whatsoever to be closed-minded and say you can't let those guys come in and say, whoever it is, if they want to sing a gospel song, they're going to be heard by more people than we're ever going to be heard by.
Yep.
So why would you not want them to do that? It's kind of a narrow-minded thing, and I feel like a lot of the powers that be in our gospel music world, they've kind of dropped that somewhat. Now they are looking to get the gospel word out to the world.
Yeah.
which is what we're supposed to be doing.
It's all about
So
the gospel.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's all about the gospel. I love what you said about being prepared. Okay, because
Yeah.
you know I've seen you in other interviews, and you talk about training your voice just as somebody works out. Okay,
Exactly.
we live in a period of time in life where it's excellence. People are looking for excellence in anything you do. Let's just take it. Your photography business, okay? You can't not have, okay, if you take 80 pictures at a wedding and only 8 of them are good, that's not acceptable, okay?
No, that's horrible business, right?
It's horrible business. Do a lot of Southern, and I'm going to pick on Southern gospel people here for just a second, because I'm talking to you like we're at home, because we come out of the same stream and we're talking about the same point of the world. Do you feel like a lot of folks that sing gospel music now show up unprepared in church to sing that music and gives the whole genre sometimes a bad image? And I'm not just talking singing, I'm talking about look, I'm talking about the way they communicate on stage. Do we need to get more prepared as artists? Do we need to get more prepared as ministers and leaders?
There's no doubt. I feel like a lot of times we take on the mindset of, well, I'm just doing this at church. That's always really rubbed me the wrong way, because my dad instilled in me very early on in my life that anything that you do in life, if you want to be good at it, you work hard at it. But if you're going to actually attach God, our Heavenly Father, to what you're doing, you have a responsibility to make sure that you're doing everything in your power to make it the very best it can possibly be. And I've never forgotten that he told me that a couple of times, and it stuck with me. And I've always had a little bit of problem just kind of telling you how I feel.
Yeah.
But when it comes to something like that, and I see somebody get up and they're not prepared, and it kind of hurts my feelings a little bit. I would probably agree with you on that, but I think people are doing a better job of that somewhat. What I would love to see happen is some responsible people, even on the local level in churches, and then kind of pull some people aside and say, hey, this is we're representing a much higher power here than any other genre of music. So let's really get to work and make it the best it can be.
And I'm not going to stop picking on the gospel artists. I'm going to pick on the programmers and the radio stations and that sort of thing, because let's face it, a lot of times radio gives gospel music a worse image than if somebody had never heard it, because
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. But it's all encompassing. It gets back to the record companies that are signing certain artists, basically just to make the money, make money on this project or whatever. Basically, just running a business, and we'll put you on radio and all that kind of a thing. It's kind of been a problem for the past 25 or 30 years, and we're seeing it a little bit more frequently now.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a lot of good things going on.
Exactly.
So that I think we need to focus on the good and continue to work on where we're having a problem in those other avenues. But, yeah, I would agree with you on that somewhat.
Josh, if I got in your car today and I hit one of the 5 presets, what genres of music is your personal radio stations on?
Well, if you get in mine, you're probably not going to hear much music. A lot of times it goes straight to talk radio. But now with technology like it is, it's normally on a podcast or some type of sports or something like that. And I just play music off of iTunes.
Gotcha.
And here lately, this will not surprise you, but there's it's in that movie. I wouldn't recommend it. There's a movie out that was a remake of an old movie that had some incredible singing in it that I've got listening to pretty well. And it's one of those things that it's an artist that was thought of as a pop artist that I just realized, my gracious alive, what an incredible singer.
You're talking about Barbara Streisand in A Star Is Born, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
go ahead and say the name. We're not. Well, that's why we're a podcast. We say that kind of stuff. But go ahead. I mean, you're exactly right. But go ahead.
Yeah, that not her. I mean, she's incredible.
Yeah.
But Lady Gaga in that was just absolutely incredible. And I disdain her.
Yeah.
But I was just astonished, and even Bradley Cooper in that movie, that it was mind blowing how much he improved his voice and sang that. But there's some of that you're gonna hear more than anything else. If you got in my car, you're gonna hear some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I study a lot of Pavarotti and Andrea Bocelli and some of that also.
Yeah.
So, but then there's times you'll get in and you'll hear just what I said, a piano and four guys singing around it.
That, we share in similar taste in various ways, because you could get listen to my podcast, and here you could hear Harry Connick Jr., you could hear Pavarotti, then you could hear Randy Owens, George Jones, David Phelps, Gaither Vocal Band, Legacy 5, and even, I'm not ashamed to say it, Axl Rhodes. I mean, you could hear him. Okay, let's just call it like it is. I mean,
that's the same thing with me. When I'm really studying, I listen to music that I like, but I always hone in on what are they doing vocally. And I think probably a guitar player would hone in, okay, what's that guitar player doing? But there's all kinds of different parts of the voice that's used in all those different music, all the different genres that you just mentioned. You know, that hard rock, Axl Rhodes, scream and rasp. That comes from the pharynx in the voice. Well, there's time not from a screaming standpoint, but there's parts of that needs to be used vocally. So it's good to hear somebody that actually sings in that, right in that range, to hear what they're doing. That's the kind of thing that I never realized was actually occurring before going to Brett Manning. And then he taught me to unlock those other parts of the voice, and what ends up happening is the overall voice, the way that you want to sing, it just all gets better.
One of the funniest stories of my livelihood that I can remember being in youth group as a kid was we were all at church, and we were downstairs in the fellowship hall. And you know how when you're at church and the kids are downstairs and the adults are upstairs meeting or whatever. And as we were downstairs in the fellowship hall, a kid named Michael goes over and turns the radio back then on a station called 96 Rock in Atlanta. And they were playing heavy metal music. Now, you just don't do that in the church, but we were playing heavy metal music. Well, all of a sudden, the pastor comes downstairs and says, "What are y'all listening to?" in a very stern and gruff voice. And Michael, I don't know how he figured this out, but looks at the pastor and says, "We're trying to figure out our bass lines for our choir song with youth choir, because if you notice, do you hear the heavy bass tones in the heavy metal song there? Well, I'm trying to show them how to voice this out, because the bass in the heavy metal matches the bass in the Southern gospel in the machine." So anyway, that's a story for another day. That's a story for another day. Do you ever worry about this? Because I worry about this. Do you? And maybe yours do. But do you ever worry that your kids are not going to know what hymn number 120 in the Redback book is, or that hymn number 57 is? I just talked about Victory in Jesus, Our Amazing Grace. Do you ever worry about that, and that we're losing some of that?
I do a little bit, but I don't think in my mind, those great hymns and those great songs, they'll never go away. I like with you, I don't think they'll ever know the number they were in the hymn book, but I think you're always going to hear those songs.
Yeah.
I think something Gerald's doing with that hymn sing, I think, is great, and I think he'll continue to evolve that so that it grows and grows bigger and bigger. But just getting those songs back out, and what I'm hearing in the choir music, choral music world, and the church world, I think it's poised for a comeback over the next 10 years.
I believe you're right.
So, yeah, that's kind of where things are headed, I feel like. So I think it will always transition in and transition out. But I go to Church of the Highlands, which is one of the biggest churches in the world for that matter.
Yeah.
I think it's the second largest church in the U.S. now. All those different locations that they have, but it's normally every service that I'm at, somewhere in that music, there's a chorus of a hymn or a full hymn. It's always there. So I don't think it's going to go away, but I do think it won't be quite as prevalent as what it has been in years past. But that's okay. Things come and go, but those timeless songs will never go. It just means that there's going to be great stuff coming along. Also, I think that's the case anyway.
All right, here's the toughest question I've asked you all day long. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Bear Bryant or Nick Saban? You got to win a game. Which one you taking?
Got to win one game?
Got to win one game. Bear Bryant or Nick Saban?
You got to win one game. I don't know that I don't go with Bear Bryant.
Wow.
And I am now if I've got to win 14 games a year, 15 a year, and win national championships, probably going to go with Nick Saban. But it's one of those things where Alabama under Nick Saban has not been quite as dominant when they've had a little bit of a layoff. If they've had 2 to 3 weeks to prepare, if you go back and look at the record, if they have an off week, we get upset when we have a bye week and then we end up playing LSU and we play poorly. There's something about his process that he runs that's continually, it needs to be enacted continually. So that's really a toss-up. I think greatest coach ever in college football, I think it's going to be Nick Saban because of what he's done and the short amount of time that he's done it at Alabama. That's what's mind-blowing to me.
Well, you can't.
11 years that he's been there.
You can't count another Alabama boy out because he's a young man. You can't count Dabo out of the mix. And
no, Dabo. That's the thing about it. That's why I don't get upset. I'm as about as big of a Alabama fan as you'll ever find.
Yeah.
And I don't get too upset when we lose to Clemson. I get upset, but I don't get that upset because he is an Alabama boy. Grew up in Pelham, played for Gene Stallings. Alabama was we loved him. He was such a great possession receiver, and then he just worked his way up.
Yeah.
So and you know what? More than likely, when Saban retires, that's the first phone call they make. I'm not sure if Dabo comes back. What he's built at Clemson, I feel like he will. So you don't get too upset, but it's still bothersome. You got to go one game. You got to win one game. You go back and look at Bear Bryant, but if you got to build a program that's going to do it in a 10 to 15 year period, that's Saban. Absolutely Saban.
Well, you could be a fan like me and realize that the Georgia Bulldogs haven't won a national championship since 1980 when Herschel Walker was there, but yet we win 10 games every single year, and we're in the top 5 every single year, but we just can't get over the top. We're like the Chicago Cubs or the Boston Red Sox used to be, and it just drives me crazy. But, hey, we'll get there one of these days. Josh, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, man. And you know what, folks, let me throw this out there for Josh. I appreciate him jumping on the line with me today and being a part of SGMA. Arthur's gone, so Arthur would have had a lot of questions for you and a lot of fun stuff. We'll get you on later with him. But tell folks how they can find more out about Josh and Legacy 5 and find your products and all that kind of good stuff.
Let me say one thing, too, about Arthur Rice. Early on when I was singing with Gary Jones, Arthur came to me. Steve French actually came to me and said, hey, man, there's a guy that said you're going to be an incredible singer or doing an amazing job, something like that. I said, well, that guy's crazy. He said, well, it's Arthur Rice. I think he knows. So then Arthur came to me later. He said, buddy, he said, I think you got one of the brightest futures. He was an encourager to me as a young guy, and I've never forgotten that. Every time I see Arthur now, I always remind him we talk. And so I love Arthur Rice. He's a great, great person. As far as Legacy 5, that's simple, legacy5.com. You can find anything you need to know there, tour schedule, music, all that kind of thing. JoshFeemstermusic.com is where you can keep up with what's going on with me. And, of course, I'm on Facebook and those type things also.
Awesome, my friend. Well, tell Scott Fowler at the end of the day, since you've been on SGNP and we get 100,000 downloads or so to listen to the show, that he needs to give you a raise now, okay?
Good luck with that.
All righty, my friend. Josh, I got one question to ask you that I always asked Arthur before we leave here, and it goes back to a guy that was influential in both of our lives, and it's kind of funny that I brought him up to you before. There was a little old preacher in East Alabama that you knew and I knew that preached in Georgia, a guy named Raymond Cook. And he always said this, and we always say it at the end of every show we do. What's wrong with living right anyway?
There's a name above all others, wonderful to hear, bringing hope and cheer. It's the lovely name of Jesus, evermore the same. What a lovely name. Oh, what a lovely name, the name of Jesus, reaching higher far than the brightest star. It's sweeter than the songs they sing in heaven. Let the world proclaim, what a lovely name. He'll return in clouds of glory.
Toccoa Falls College in Toccoa Falls, Georgia. Since 1907, TFC glorifying God through seeking and developing leaders who will impact the world for Jesus Christ. For more information on TFC, call 706-886-7299 or visit them online at tfc.edu. That's tfc.edu.
Thank you for listening to SGNP. If you're listening on radio, please note you can listen to our podcast 24/7 on your own schedule. Just download wherever you get your podcast from or visit us online at southerngospelnewspodcast.com. To hear it on your smart speaker, just ask Alexa or Google to play Southern Gospel News Podcast. And after listening, please leave a remark in the remarks section and subscribe, and you'll receive our program free every Friday. And remember to check out Southern Gospel News Podcast social media for daily fun and giveaways. We're the audible voice of gospel music. We look to uplift you every week. SGNP, where it's all about the gospel.